Hey, everybody, it's Kurt here. Just wanted to take a second to set up this episode because it is just a little different than some other episodes. Longtime listeners, you know that we do sometimes have guests on that we just want to give a space to have a conversation about leadership and how they experience leadership in the wild, if you will. We're going to do that today with Piet Westerbeek. I'll let him say more about who he is. But before we get into that, I just want to say, if you're listening and you want to know more about this conversation and how Brimstone Coaching Group might partner with you to help you navigate leadership challenges where you are, you can find Chris and I at our website at brimstonecoachinggroup.com. You can find a link for a free inquiry session where we can talk more about what this could look like between you and your challenge in front of you, or where you're stuck, and how we think about coaching. The other thing I would say is this, before we get into it with Piet, if you're listening, you have questions or you have wonderings, or you want to say something, or you want to chime in to the conversation with Piet, we would love to have you do that. You can leave comments wherever you listen to the pod, whether that's YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or something else, or you can send us an email at livefullyleadauthentically@gmail.com. Again, that's livefullyleadauthentically@gmail.com. You can send us those questions or those thoughts or those things that you're processing, and Chris and I will address those on a mailbag episode together. So that's it. Enjoy this episode with Piet. I sure did. I enjoyed talking to Piet, and I know you're going to enjoy listening to it too. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Live Fully, Lead Authentically. My name is Kurt Busch, co-founder here at Brimstone Coaching Group. Today's podcast is going to look a little different. Normally, Chris and I are talking through some of the things that make for full life and authentic leadership. Today, we have a guest. It's my pleasure to welcome Piet Westerbeek. Piet has worked in leadership for most of his career. He's worked in manufacturing, educational curriculum, and is currently general manager of Sioux County Radio in Sioux Center, Iowa. He's married to his wife for 28 years. He's got 3 kids, 1 grandkid, and another one on the way. Piet subscribes to a servant leadership model that he learned many years ago and continues to lean into that in his leadership today. Piet, you and I met on a radio show that you hosted called The Daily Grind. We talked a lot about leadership, had a great conversation. I'm super pumped to have you here to talk a little more in depth. Thanks for joining us, man.
Kurt, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited to talk about it. It's something I'm passionate about, and I feel honored that you asked me on your podcast today, so thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we talked a little bit about our book, Chris and I's book, when we were with you on the radio. And it became really clear right away.
This one right here? Is that one?
Look at that.
I did that on purpose, just for you. I'm a marketing guy. What can I say?
You are a pro. You're a pro. We found really quickly, Chris and I, with you, found some common ground really quickly. We just started talking about leadership, and it just seemed really natural to have a deeper conversation. I think this word leadership, Piet, it gets thrown around a lot in a lot of different ways, and someone like you that's led in so many different settings and places, how do you think about leadership today?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. Leadership, like when you're young, sometimes you get this idea of, well, being a leader is telling people what to do.
Yeah.
And it's so far from that, it's not. Leaders don't tell people what to do. I think they try to inspire people to get things done and to do things right. And I think if you take a genuine interest in people and what they're about, what their goals are, and understand them, you will learn from them. They will teach you how to lead. And I think that's the aspect of it too, is that I think that when you're a leader, you need to allow yourself to fail. I fail every day. I make mistakes every day. And I have to learn from them. And sometimes I don't, and that's human. And sometimes I do. But I think that if you think that you're the best leader since sliced bread, you need to turn around and try to figure out what's going wrong, right?
Yeah.
Because I do. I mean, I constantly question. I constantly think, is there a different way I could have handled it? And I have failed massively in leadership before because I'm human, right? I'm sinful.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way I see it. Is it's a constantly evolving, morphing thing,
Yeah.
and understanding the people that you lead, so to speak, is the only way to lead.
Yeah. I really love that you bring up failing.
Mm,
I think I've said this on the pod before, but I've never told you this. But I coached a middle school basketball team for a little Christian school my kids were in once.
mhm,
I was an assistant coach, and I didn't know anything about basketball. It was a Christian school where it's kind of all hands on deck, right?
mhm.
And this team crushed everybody. You know, little Christian school conference. Nobody, there's not really deep talent anywhere, but these kids crushed everybody.
Sure.
Undefeated, won the championship, all that. The principal of the school came up to us after the season, me and the other coach, and said, "Hey, this is great and all, but like, what did you learn?"
Mm,
And what he was getting at was like, you didn't fail. Like
mhm.
you didn't lose a game. Like that losing or failing really is like where we learn. Why is it so important to learn from those things, Pete?
Yeah. Well, I think that you have to, because again, being imperfect and not understanding everything there is to be about leadership. I mean, I think you can look at the leader of Fortune 500 companies and they probably say something similar, right?
Mm,
In the
yeah,
way that, yeah, they get the big money. Yeah, they're expected to lead. But if they're being real with themselves, they're constantly saying, what could I have done differently? They're analyze situations. But then the
yeah,
difference is when you do fail, how do you react to it?
yeah,
And there's two ways to do it. You can pull yourself into a ball and detach yourself, which I have done in my life,
yeah,
or you can go out there and say, all right, I'm not going to let that happen again, and this is the plan forward.
yeah,
And I think planning is a big part of it. You need to plan, and if you don't plan, you plan to fail, right? I mean, the whole thing that they say about that. But if you don't do those sort of things, then that's the kind of reaction you're going to have. And
yeah,
and I have I can think of numerous situations in my life that I failed massively, and at the time in the moment I couldn't see that
mm,
this is be a good thing, because you're so
yeah,
wrapped up in the consequences of what happened. I got fired from a job once in my life, and it
mm,
was the worst thing ever to happen, but it was necessary. And it
yeah,
was necessary because I wasn't good at it, and it was necessary because I wasn't happy in it. It was necessary because there was a person in that company that I didn't get along with. In fact, they told me when I walked in the door, I am never going to you're never going to be as good as the guy you're replacing. That was the first
mm,
conversation I had, and I let that person get to me, and I failed, and then I pulled into myself, and I froze.
mm,
And that happening in my life taught me I'm never going to let that happen again. I'm never going
yeah,
to let somebody define me. I'm never going to let somebody scare me. I'm going to try to understand them better, try to understand why did they say that to me. There's a reason. So rather than getting mad, pulling away, I would go back and try to figure out what's happening. But you
yeah.
know, failure is such an important piece to this, because as you get older, I'm going to turn 50 here pretty quick. You start to do a more self-reflecting. You don't take yourself as serious as you used to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for the story, Pete. I'm curious. You can always tell me no when I ask these questions, but I'm curious. I'm curious about that experience of getting fired from a
hmm
job.
Yeah,
Um, I'm curious how that shows up today. Does it show up today? Does that experience still show up in the way you lead today?
of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, in the way that, it's you learn a lot of things of what not to do, right?
Mm,
And I think that those experiences stick in your head. Like it's human to say, I don't want to repeat that ever.
yeah.
I think especially for sometimes, forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but sometimes men, they really take themselves and what they're doing as their definition of who they are. Right.
Yeah.
So when a man loses his job and then he can't provide for his family, that's the worst thing that can ever happen. Well, guess what? It was not the worst thing that can ever happen. I've had worse things happen in my life. Lost
Yeah.
people. I've, made dumb decisions. I've chose myself over others. And then it ended badly. So, it's one of those things that it's just a learning point, that I never want to get fired again. But then also, what did I do to get there? And everybody, I mean, you have people that get let go and they right away talk about how bad the company was and all that kind of stuff. It's not the case. You have a piece of that in there. You're not just getting fired for no reason. You have to own up to the fact. And I wasn't good at it. I just wasn't good at it. And it took me some time to understand that.
Yeah. I think that's really important. One of the things Chris and I will ask people all the time, and ourselves, I mean, one of the earliest coachings Chris ever gave me was the question of like, what part do you play in this? This idea that we play a part in every situation we find ourselves in, good or bad. We're all actors in our play of life, if you will. Thanks for saying that, Pete.
Sure.
Let me ask you another question. What's changed in the way you think about leadership from early career to now? You said you were turning 50. Pete, I thought you were like 35.
No, you can't say it with a white. I don't think you're telling the truth.
You'll never know, Pete.
Right.
What's changed over time for you? Like you've learned, you've transformed, you've matured. Like what's different about how you think about leadership today?
Well, I think that as generations change, so does leadership. An example would be I'm a Gen Xer, and I think there's a lot wrapped up in this, more so than people sometimes understand. But Gen Xers, we're kind of people that we go work hard. You don't hear us complain much. That we go get it done. We have a really hard work ethic, and we will push through it with hard work and that sort of thing. And, to lead that way when I was younger, that was, you had a firm boss. This is the expectations that boomer generation is who we were working for most of the time, which is now retiring, was kind of saying, hey, this is what I expect. These are my expectations. Go get it done. Leadership is changing with that because, these generations are looking for leadership, but they're looking for people that they can believe in. That they're looking for people to say, hey, you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk. And just because you're a manager doesn't mean anything to me. And that's interesting. Whereas when I was a kid or younger, the management position I respected because you're a manager. And so that is changing, and I think that's good. That you should lead by example. You should lead by showing them the way in the way of, hey, this is important. And understanding the motivations behind it, but then understanding that people are led differently. That older approach was one, like a one schoolroom approach with everybody. We teach them the same way. Education has changed that same way too, right? Where we now cater to the students in a way that they learn. Examples would be, doodling in class. I wasn't supposed to do that. Now they encourage it because kids learn because they're keeping one part of their brain busy. Good stuff to know, right? So you individualize your leadership to the people you're working with. I can say something to an employee or a team member, I should say, directly, and other ones I can't, because direct to them is scary, or it seems like I'm yelling at them. So you change the way you work with people, not fairness wise, but leadership wise.
I think one of the things we see at Brimstone most is this shift, like for the better, the shift away from that sort of power and control leadership model, the shift away from the like, you're going to do what I tell you because I'm the manager and I'm the boss, to the more authentic form of leadership, the more self-aware form of leadership, the form that says, I mean, like you said earlier, I'm going to inspire you versus order you. I love that shift. There's a long way to go. There's still a large remnant of that old mental model. What is it like? I think you and I both would have experiences on probably different levels, but having to adjust real time to that. Like, what's that like?
It's not easy. It's not
no.
easy. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where you want to kind of go back to what you know. It's like there are times where you say, "Can you just do it because I said so?"
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to, because
Uh-huh.
sometimes the last person has to make a decision on this, but you'd rather not get to that point.
Yeah.
So you have to ask your team for, lots of input. And I think that's what's good about that, because it taught us of our generation that this is a teamwork situation. And I've had a
Yeah.
lot of good mentors in my career. In fact, the guy that had to let me go is one of the people I also look up to.
Oh
And we
yeah.
have a good relationship because, I model a lot of the way I actually, when I do news stories or I interview people, the guy was always curious. And I think that's something you bring into leadership, is that he would ask more
Mm,
questions about them and things that are going on.
yeah.
And that makes people feel like they matter, right?
Yeah.
So in a situation, it's good, because that boomer generation, it's not they didn't care, but they were taught to
Yeah.
give orders, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of their parents were the same way. They went through World War II, they took orders, and
Yeah.
so that passes down the generations. So
Yeah.
I think it's okay. I mean, do I think it gets out of hand? Yeah. I mean, there can be situations where, talking about my goals doesn't make me feel safe.
Yeah.
That's too bad. We got to
Yeah.
talk about goals, right? But in
Yeah.
the other hand of it, let's have a real conversation about those goals and what's bothering you about it. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
talk about it and see
Yeah.
where we need to, go to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a shadow side to everything, right? Like
Yeah.
like there's a shadow to every leadership model. There's a shadow side to every
Hmm.
uh positive attribute of leader. There's always a shadow taken too far or taken in the wrong
Yeah.
context. I would agree.
And
Um
the younger generations it's harder for my generation to do that, because it's so much change, right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, it's one of those things where you just say, hey, I got to learn them. And part of it too is talking to college students. I'll go speak to
Yeah.
college students in classes, or we bring people in to our radio station that are from that generation that are interning,
Mm,
and you can pick up on that stuff and get to know them. And there's so
yeah.
many positive aspects about them
Yeah.
that you just have to look for.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, is don't get caught on that generational difference,
Yeah.
because it's real easy to do that. It's real easy to explain, but
Yeah.
if you get past that, you can start to understand them.
I, Pete, I think that's really wise. I was just thinking that same thing. How I have a 16-year-old son, and he's not necessarily thinking about leadership, but I see
Yeah.
some of the generational differences, and I like some of them are so good.
Oh yeah.
Some of these generational differences are things that my generation would never think about doing. That's
Yeah.
really positive. But I also realize, I led a team of volunteers not that long ago where there was somebody closer to that boomer generation and somebody closer to Gen Z. And being in the middle of that, leading a team made up of all that generational difference is just
Yeah.
so hard.
Oh yeah. No, I agree. And I think but I mean, if you look throughout time, that's always the way it is. I mean, my
Yeah.
grandparents were
Yeah.
complaining about my generation,
That's
and they
right.
thought the end of the world was going to happen because people like Pete are going to go into the workforce and mess it all up, and I get it. I mean, I totally get it, but I also
Yeah.
think that it's sometimes really easy to use that as an excuse.
Yeah.
I don't want to grow because these guys are irritating me,
Yeah.
that's why I got a great boss, and the owner of our company, and he constantly, talks with me about these things, and how are you leading? What are you doing to motivate? And
Yeah.
don't just tell, understand, and listen. And those are great things, and that's
Mm.
you grow in leadership because of those you have around you, and
Yeah.
the owner of our company is one of those guys. He's just a great person, and
Yeah.
greatly understanding of what it takes to be a leader, because he's done it himself. And then he
Yeah.
also knows how to motivate leaders, which is something I can learn how to do, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
something I can grow into, leading leaders, right? I
Yeah.
hope
Yeah.
someday to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you a question. You said a word that I want to touch on. You said curiosity.
Mm.
This is a value that Chris and I would both personally say is a deeply held value, and as a coaching practice, we would say curiosity is at the core of who we want to be.
Hmm.
Uh, but I'm also aware that there's a large population of people around us that might look at curiosity as a weakness. That
Sure.
might see a curious leader as an indecisive leader, or a
Hmm.
leader who is afraid to make a decision. How if I'm playing devil's advocate and I'm saying, hey, leaders need to be decisive and firm and curiosity
Sure.
is weak, what would you say to me if I said those things to you.
Well, how are you going to be decisive in your decisions if you don't understand the people you're with? And I think that's the main part of it. Is if people look at curious people as being a bad leader, then I'm terrible.
Yeah.
And we always make a joke, because I do a lot, in sales and things like that. And you ever heard the ABC, always be closing?
Yeah.
I always say always be curious.
I
And
love
and
that.
and the point of it is that, first of all, in sales, you need to understand the people you're working with. You need to understand their company. Walking in and just saying, "Hey, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Use this radio, use this digital component that it's the dog and pony show, and you have absolutely zero understanding of this product or the service is going to work for them, right?
Yeah.
So what do
Yeah.
you do? You walk in there, you don't try to sell them anything, you try to understand them. Well, the same thing is true of leadership, is that once you understand them, you can put a proposal forward, just like you do in sales. And
Yeah.
then with your people, you put the proposal forward. Well, listening to what you guys said is this, and this. So you're taking their ideas as they've given them to you and then presenting them back to them with a solution.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's leadership, that's sales. That's the only way you can do that in today's world. Because
Yeah.
if you're walking in there and just saying, "Hey, look at me, I'm so great," or "Look at me, my product's so great," there's 5 million people out there that do and say the same things. You need to
Yeah.
differentiate yourself. And so leadership is the same way. If you're just telling people what to do and not understanding them by not being curious, well, then you're kind of an empty suit,
Yeah.
right? You're just there
Yeah.
giving orders, and you're guessing. You're guessing, and you're going to make many more mistakes because you're not understanding the people and what you're trying to get done.
Yeah.
Is my opinion.
I love the statement, "You're guessing." I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Um, yeah, I've just seen too many leaders that I have deep respect for who hold such a real posture of curiosity. I've seen them create cultures that are so healthy and so fruitful. I wanted to say productive. I'm not sure that's the right word, but I've seen it work too many times for me to say curiosity is weakness.
Sure.
I think it's the
Well,
opposite.
and again, surrounding yourself with people that are going to lead you in that way. One of the things I think that made me decent at sales and makes me decent at leadership was I interned as a news director in college. And
Mm,
you're asking questions of people that don't always like it, especially
yeah.
politicians, and you kind of
Yeah.
have to quantify that, saying, "Listen, I'm asking the questions for the right reasons." And when
Yeah.
you're telling people that, you say, "Hey, listen, I'm going to ask these questions because I'd like to better understand you, better
Mm,
understand how I can be a better leader, and then mean it."
yeah.
Again, going back to my boss, same type of thing. Going back to guy he worked with, the guy's actually in the South Dakota Hall of Fame
Mm,
for radio, and he asks great questions, and then he comes out there and he encourages, and he goes with ideas, and those are the
yeah.
kind of people you surround yourself with, and you become better because of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that, Pete. Um, let me ask you one last question. This all feels way too rushed. I feel like we could do this for
we can do it
two.
again if you want.
Yeah, we
I'd be
might have to
happy
have
to
a
come
part
back on.
two. Might have
Sure,
to have a part two. So I'm going to ask two questions. You can pick which one you want to answer.
ooh,
uh,
multiple choice.
yeah, yeah. Same question, a little different object to the question. What would you want to say to younger Pete as a leader that you might want younger Pete to know based on what you know today? Or if that's too much, that's okay. I didn't tell you I was going to do that. Or what would you want to say to someone listening to this who's maybe not sure they feel like a leader, or not feel like they know how to like let go of that
Yeah.
old model of leadership?
I would say to myself and to others two things. And that is, don't let failure define you.
Mm,
And meaning that when you fail, get up, brush yourself off, and
yeah.
move forward and learn from it. But the other part of it too is to not take yourself so serious that you shut yourself down.
Mm,
And what happened with me was I think a number of my managers or my bosses throughout time said, "I never had to yell at you, Pete, because you yell at yourself.
mm,
You get down on yourself and you shut yourself down."
yeah.
And that is also debilitating, as getting yelled at, right? Because you just kind of shut down. And so I let others define me that way. And that's another piece of it, is don't let others define who you are.
Yeah.
I'm a creation of God. I have things to say.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as I'm trying to stick to those things, then you should feel free to, go out there. Funny thing is, I used to always say things like, so and so said this, and so said this. trying to make myself sound smarter or better leadership based on
Yep.
other people's things.
Yep.
And I think sometimes trusting yourself to say, hey, I'm going to be intentional about what I say. I'm going to be intentional about the way I lead,
Yep.
and not have to define that with other people to endorse you. It makes you a better leader, because then people take you at your word and understand who you are. And,
Yeah.
I think that's probably, don't let others define you, and give yourself a break, let yourself fail, and
Yeah.
then learn from it and move forward.
Yeah, that's so good, Pete. I think what resonates when you say that, is this idea that our organizations or our families or whatever we're leading today, they need all of us, not part of us, not some, not another leadership guru or whoever it is that we might quote in those situations. Like, they need us because we're there.
Yep.
We're in the seat, if you will. And I think that resonates so deeply. I hope it resonates with the listener to say, how do we be fully who we are in those places that we
Well,
are.
I think too that, one of the things, you kind of got me with that question. It makes me think, but when you say the best of us, sometimes when we go to work, everybody gets the best of us, but our family gets the rest.
Mm,
And I think that's a thing that I would like to affix in my life too, is that
sure.
I'm at my best, I'm trying my best, and then when I get home, I'm just like, ugh,
Yeah.
and they don't get the
Yeah.
best. And I think a person that's successful is going to have a good family life and a
Mm,
family in order, and know when to turn work off and when to allow family in,
yeah.
and to balance that well. That makes a
Yeah.
good leader too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish if Chris was here, he would say something like this. I'm going to butcher it, but he says it really well. He would say something like, maybe in a season of life, 75% is all I've got to give, and that's
Mhm.
maybe the best of me.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a season where kids or family are involved in a million things, and maybe work is going to get 75%, and
Yeah.
maybe that's okay in a season when I have to spread myself out. So I think there is a wisdom to knowing what season we're in and knowing what best of us actually means,
Sure.
so that we can be the
Yeah.
best of us in all the places.
Yeah. I agree. And, I can look a bunch of times where my family did not get my best because of, things,
Yeah.
busyness or making wrong decisions. And,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's one thing you want to strive for, because that's what really matters in life. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We only have but one self to give, right?
Yeah. That's right. No,
Yeah.
I appreciate it, Kurt. Very good interviewer, by the way. I appreciate that. I do it every day, and you're doing really awesome. So thank you. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Pete. I think you're trying to recruit me a little bit right now, and I don't appreciate it.
You saw right through me. All right.
Yeah, yeah. Chris is going to be coming at you.
There you go. There you go. So,
Well, thanks, Pete. I really do think we could have gone much, much longer talking about this, but I just want to say I appreciate the little bit that I've gotten to know you. I appreciate your
sure.
posture. I appreciate your humility. From what I've seen, you have such a great grasp of what it means to lead from a humble place and to lead in a way that makes people better.
I appreciate that, and I'm trying.
Yeah.
And I hope I can continue to get better.
Yeah.
That's real. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for giving the time. Yeah. Is there, normally when we talk to people, we'll say, like, how do people find you? Like, is there a way, like, you want to plug Sioux County Radio? Is there something you
yeah,
want to?
hop on
Yeah.
Sioux County Radio, take a look. We do a lot with Daily Grind. One thing, if you love, we do a show called Rogers Corner. And that's a show specifically to help people with mental health. I
Mm,
lost my best friend to suicide a number of years ago.
mm,
And we created a show along with the Creative Living Center in Rock Valley. And so we've been doing that. It was a lot of it to do with suicide. It's morphed
mm.
into more mental health, but also covering how to prevent suicide and those sort of things. We hope that show grows,
Yeah.
even for mental health situations that are every day. We
Yeah.
discuss it. So if you go on our website, Sioux County Radio, go to programs, click on Rogers Corner, you can see all the episodes we've ever taped. And that's just to help people out. That's what we want to do.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I'll put a link to that, listener. I'll put a link in the show notes below. So
Appreciate that.
you
Thank you
can
so much for that.
find that below. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pete, thanks so much, man. Keep up the good work. Glad to know you, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Kurt. Take care.